Forget everything you think you know about powdered wigs. The image we carry today, of gentlemen in high heels and silk stockings, teetering beneath mountains of white curls, barely scratches the surface of a story rooted in disease, denial, and desperation. This isn't a quaint fashion tale. It's a drama soaked in suffering and stitched together with lies. Step into Europe during the late 1400s. The continent is scarred by the memory of the Black Death, still reeling from a demographic collapse that changed everything from farming to faith. But as society begins to reassemble itself, a new biological horror begins to creep across the population, silent at first, but devastating in effect. Syphilis, the Great Pox, spreads like wildfire. No one knows where it came from. Some blame the New World. Others blame soldiers, prostitutes, or foreign enemies. What's certain is that its arrival is sudden and its effects catastrophic. The disease begins with a small, painless sore, easily ignored. But soon, it escalates into madness. Rashes bloom, skin peels away, bones deteriorate, and, most damningly in a society obsessed with image, hair falls out in great, shameful clumps. Baldness becomes more than a medical issue. It becomes a symbol of sin, of disgrace, of moral collapse. And in the highly visual social world of Renaissance and early modern Europe, where appearance equals virtue, losing one's hair is akin to social death. Nobles, especially, are expected to maintain an aura of perfection. Their hair isn't just decoration. It's a symbol of vitality, discipline, divine favor, and control. Hair is the crown you wear before your actual crown. And when that crown begins to crumble due to syphilis, people panic. But rather than confronting the disease directly, society does what it often does when faced with horror: it covers it up. First with scarves and hats, then with partial hairpieces, and finally, with wigs, elaborate, powdered, perfumed wigs that start modestly and soon explode into absurdity. These wigs become the most visible, and most ironic, response to an invisible, shameful plague. What began as a cover-up became a culture. By the time the 17th century arrives, powdered wigs are no longer just for hiding illness. They have transformed into weapons of social climbing, tools of status, and theatrical displays of loyalty. And no one embodies this better than Louis XIV of France. The Sun King, as he called himself, understood the power of performance better than any ruler before or after. His entire reign is built on the manipulation of image. Versailles itself is a theater of power. And so, when young Louis begins to lose his hair, the consequences are unthinkable. The image of an eternal, godlike king cannot be interrupted by something as human and humiliating as baldness. Louis hires dozens of wig makers, up to 48 at once, crafting a new persona out of hair. His wigs are not just coverings. They are architectural marvels, feats of construction that elevate his head physically and symbolically above the rest. Each wig is powdered, perfumed, curled, and stacked until it towers like a monument to denial. The court follows suit immediately. Soon, to appear at Versailles without a wig is not just unfashionable, it is treasonous. Wigs become the uniform of those who matter. The wigless are the powerless. And beneath all this theatricality, the original reason for wigs, the disease that shall not be named, continues to spread silently. Louis's influence doesn't stop at the French border. Other European courts, eager to imitate Versailles, adopt the wig culture with gusto. From Prussian generals to British lords, the powdered wig becomes the unspoken language of nobility. It signifies wealth, breeding, education, and virtue. But underneath the powder, scalps are shaved, sore, and often crawling with lice. The hygiene of the time is primitive at best. Bathing is rare, thought to be dangerous. Hair, once the pride of nobility, is now a liability. Wigs offer a grotesque kind of convenience. You can boil them to kill lice, powder them to hide odor, and style them to perfection, all without revealing the truth of your own head. Wig makers rise in status, forming guilds, setting prices, becoming indispensable to the ruling classes. France alone has over 1,000 wig makers by the mid-1700s. A single bespoke wig can cost more than half a year's wages for a skilled worker. Wigs become big business, quite literally. As powdered wigs grow taller, heavier, and more elaborate, they become more than just a fashion statement. They become instruments of social warfare. The court of Louis XIV becomes a competitive battleground of hair. Nobles compete not only in etiquette, land, or favor, but in height, specifically, the height of their wigs. The term, bigwig, isn't metaphorical at first, it's literal. The larger your wig, the more wealth, power, and proximity to the king you are assumed to have. These wigs, known as perukes or periwigs, are no longer subtle cover-ups. They are massive, structured constructions, held together with pads, wires, and stiffeners. And every inch adds meaning. Wearing one isn't just expensive, it's physically taxing. They itch, they sweat, they smell, but the discomfort is worth it for what they offer, the illusion of perfection. Behind each powdered curl lies a carefully controlled deception. And as they become more flamboyant, their symbolic power only increases. Women join the trend with even more elaborate creations. By the 1770s, aristocratic women's wigs rise into the realm of fantasy. Hairstyles depict miniature gardens, warships, entire pastoral scenes. There are wigs with cages for live birds, wigs with built-in lighting, wigs that require wooden scaffolding beneath just to support their absurd height. The boundary between hair and architecture dissolves. But while the styles reach for the heavens, their roots remain firmly planted in decay. Disease hasn't gone away. If anything, it has spread, adapted, changed shape. Syphilis remains incurable. Its effects, now better understood but still poorly treated, continue to attack the bodies of the rich and poor alike. The powdered wig is the ultimate mask, one that hides not only physical symptoms but the deep societal shame that comes with them. A man might be dying slowly under his perfect curls. A woman might be hiding sores under lavender-scented powder. But as long as the illusion holds, they remain part of the world of the living, the desirable, the powerful. To take off the wig is to confess. To wear it is to lie. But it is a lie that holds a civilization together. And like all powerful lies, it resists challenge. Even in the hygiene practices surrounding wigs, the truth is surreal. Since people rarely bathe, wigs collect not just powder, but filth, sweat, and lice. To manage this, people shave their heads completely bald. This makes the wigs fit better, and allows them to boil the wigs separately to kill lice, which are everywhere. Powder becomes a central part of the ritual. Made from starch, flour, rice, or chalk, it serves both aesthetic and practical functions. It hides the greasy base, adds volume, and masks odor. Perfumes, citrus, rose, lavender, are added to make the wigs tolerable in a world where public spaces often smell like open sewers. The powder becomes a kind of false cleanliness, a ritual deodorizing of disease. It is an artificial garden growing on the rot of real life. And while it begins in the courts, the obsession spreads. Ambitious merchants, upwardly mobile professionals, and minor officials all begin to copy the style. They cannot afford the massive wigs of nobles, but they wear smaller versions, still powdered, still perfumed, still projecting the illusion of status. This imitation creates an identity crisis among the elite. If everyone can wear a wig, what makes a noble special? The answer, again, is escalation. Bigger wigs, more elaborate styling, jewels, feathers, painted details. The aristocracy responds to mimicry with excess. Fashion becomes a ladder no one can climb fast enough. Beneath all of this, the original reason, shame and fear of disease, has been mostly forgotten by those participating. But the truth remains. The wigs exist because of syphilis. Because of rot. Because of terror. And because no one could admit the truth in public. It is a system built on denial, reinforced by performance, and upheld by visual language. You could read a person's social position by the shape, size, and powder of their wig. And if you couldn't afford one, you were excluded from the conversation entirely. The power of the powdered wig wasn't merely visual, it was psychological. It didn't just change how others perceived you, it changed how you perceived yourself. Wigs became wearable illusions that granted a sense of control in a world full of uncontrollable threats. Disease, especially one as cruel and disfiguring as syphilis, had stripped people of dignity and self-worth. The wig gave some of that back. To place it on your head was to reclaim social belonging. To curl it, powder it, and scent it was to participate in the fiction that all was well, that one's status remained intact, that one had not fallen. But this deeply emotional and cultural dependence on wigs couldn't last forever. The burden of illusion grows heavy when too many people believe in it. Beneath the surface, cracks were forming in the aristocratic world. The wealth gap between nobles and commoners widened drastically, and the powdered wigs became a glaring symbol of elite extravagance. They no longer symbolized grace, they symbolized waste. To the struggling poor and increasingly radical middle class, the towering wigs, adorned with feathers, gems, and figurines, appeared grotesque, like monuments to vanity and indifference. Even the clergy, once tolerant of aristocratic fashion, began to publicly condemn the wig culture as a mask of spiritual decay. But the elite clung harder. The more the world around them crumbled, the higher their wigs rose. The more disease ravaged their bodies, the more they painted their faces, perfumed their curls, and floated through the salons of Versailles and Vienna as if untouched by mortality. In this surreal theater of denial, the wig was both costume and character. It allowed men and women to play the roles expected of them, regardless of their real condition. But revolutions aren't built overnight. They simmer, silently. And across the Channel, in England, a different pressure was brewing, economic rather than ideological. In 1795, Prime Minister William Pitt introduced a hair powder tax. A shrewd move to raise funds for war. It required anyone who used hair powder to purchase an annual certificate. For many, this tax was the final blow. What had already become expensive and time-consuming was now actively penalized. Overnight, thousands abandoned their wigs, not for ideological reasons, but simply because it was too costly to maintain the illusion. Natural hairstyles began to emerge. Shorter, simpler cuts gained popularity. Suddenly, the powdered wig was no longer a symbol of elegance. It was a mark of outdated vanity. Meanwhile, in France, something far more explosive was happening. The French Revolution shattered the illusion of aristocratic permanence. As the heads of nobles fell beneath the blade of the guillotine, their wigs fell with them, literally and symbolically. The towering curls that had once signaled royal favor now screamed corruption and inequality. Wigs were torn off, burned, mocked. To wear one became dangerous, even fatal. The revolution demanded simplicity, equality, and natural appearance. No more powder, no more perfume, no more pretension. The wig, once a fortress against shame, became a target of rage. It was everything the revolution opposed: hidden illness, excessive wealth, social pretense. Within a matter of years, centuries of fashion collapsed. The transformation was stunning. Where once courts had been filled with glittering hair palaces, now heads were bare, clean, and short. A new ideal emerged: natural beauty, health, honesty. Hair became a reflection not of class, but of character. And yet, the psychological effects of the wig era didn't vanish so easily. Generations had been raised to equate appearance with virtue, grooming with morality, and style with status. Even without the wigs, those mental structures lingered. People still judged each other by hair, by cleanliness, by scent and skin. The powdered wig may have died, but its legacy remained embedded in European consciousness. As the powdered wigs faded into obscurity and the world shifted toward modernity, what remained was a haunted echo. A legacy of how appearances could be weaponized, how shame could drive entire cultures to build elaborate fictions on their own heads. In retrospect, it becomes clear that the story of the wig is not a trivial fashion anecdote but a profound reflection of how fear transforms societies. The wigs had begun as a private response to public shame, but they spiraled into an entire industry of social control. Even after their disappearance, the idea that visual presentation equaled moral standing remained rooted in Western society. To look healthy, composed, styled, was to appear virtuous, respectable, employable. The powdered wig had taught generations that to be accepted, you must hide the parts of yourself that are vulnerable, disfigured, or unclean, not just physically, but spiritually and socially. This is not merely history, it's a blueprint for modernity. Even today, we navigate our world wearing masks, digital or cosmetic, to shield the parts of us that might reveal weakness or imperfection. The wig was simply the most dramatic, material version of that instinct. And yet, there's a tragic beauty to it. The craftsmanship, the artistry, the dedication it took to create those mountains of curls were astounding. Wig makers were not just barbers. They were engineers, sculptors, even chemists. They created wearable fantasies, physical manifestations of a world that wanted to believe in perfection even when reality was rotting underneath. And the people who wore them, nobles, merchants, generals, lovers, were not all villains. Many were terrified, some were sick, most were simply trying to survive in a society that equated baldness with disgrace, that made no room for truth if the truth was unpleasant. They clung to their wigs like lifelines. Underneath each powdered crest was a very human cry, "Don't let them see I'm broken." This same fear drove people to invest fortunes in scent, in silk, in posture and polish. The body had become the battlefield where social wars were fought, and the wig was both armor and banner. No one could be seen for who they truly were. To do so was to risk everything: respect, livelihood, even life. Across the ocean, in the so-called New World, powdered wigs made an appearance too, though they followed a different trajectory. In colonial America, the influence of European fashion was inescapable, especially among the elite. Lawyers, judges, and politicians adopted wigs not out of necessity, but as a sign of legitimacy and authority. To wear a wig was to speak in the visual language of Europe's upper class, to establish oneself as cultured, educated, and trustworthy. Portraits of American founding fathers reflect this borrowed aesthetic. And yet, there's a twist. George Washington, often assumed to wear a wig, actually did not. He powdered and styled his own hair to mimic the formal appearance of a wig, but he preferred the authenticity of his natural hair. This subtle rebellion reflected a larger ideological shift. While America imitated Europe's visual codes, it also began to redefine what leadership and virtue looked like. Natural hair came to represent honesty, hard work, and independence, qualities central to the new republic. The powdered wig began to look like a symbol of the old world's corruption and excess. Even Thomas Jefferson, deeply influenced by French culture, abandoned the wig as the revolution intensified. The move away from wigs in America symbolized more than just a change in fashion. It marked the
beginning of a new moral aesthetic. Where Europe had once equated elaborate presentation with authority, the American ideal began to prize simplicity, transparency, and authenticity. It was a quiet revolution of appearance, one that stood in contrast to the powdered illusions of the past. But in both continents, the underlying lesson was the same. Appearance was still power. Whether through natural hair or powdered wigs, people used their heads, literally and figuratively, to signal who they were and what they stood for.
As the 19th century advanced, the powdered wig finally succumbed to time, war, and the relentless tide of changing values. The French Revolution had decapitated not only kings but also the culture of opulence that had defined the Ancien regime. In its place emerged a new aesthetic, one that favored short, natural hair and utilitarian fashion. No longer was it fashionable to appear artificial or excessively adorned. The powdered wig, once a symbol of control and refinement, came to be seen as an emblem of vanity, deceit, and outdated hierarchy. Its fall was swift and symbolic. Across Europe, courts abandoned the elaborate headpieces. The rising middle classes, emboldened by industrialization and democratic ideals, saw no need to mimic aristocratic costumes. Barbers who had once specialized in wig maintenance now offered haircuts and shaves. Wig powder rooms were dismantled, and the scented powders, lavender, bergamot, and rose, were swept away like the memories of a lost era. Even in the legal systems that had clung longest to wig tradition, such as in Britain, public debates began questioning their relevance. Why should justice be served by someone dressed like a 17th-century aristocrat? Why should a costume rooted in disease and disguise be retained in the age of steam engines and steel? And though vestiges of wig culture survive today in some courtrooms, they function more as ceremonial relics than meaningful emblems of power. Yet, if we look closely, the legacy of the powdered wig is all around us. It lingers in our obsession with youthfulness, our reliance on filters and facades, our belief that outer presentation is an accurate measure of inner worth. Social media avatars, cosmetic procedures, fashion trends, they are all echoes of that ancient impulse to control how the world sees us, especially when we feel disfigured by life. The powdered wig may be gone, but the longing it represented remains deeply embedded in our culture. It also serves as a reminder, a haunting one, that some of history's most glamorous inventions were born from fear and suffering. The syphilitic sores hidden beneath silken powder tell a sobering truth: beauty can be a mask for pain. And the longer we build societies that worship appearances, the more likely we are to repeat the same illusions. Ultimately, the story of the powdered wig is not just about hair. It's about identity, survival, shame, and power. It's about what people are willing to hide to be accepted and what societies demand in order to offer that acceptance. It's about how disease can ripple through fashion, how medicine can shape morality, and how even a simple object worn on the head can change the course of cultural history. As we examine the past with its powdered curls and perfumed disguises, we are forced to ask a difficult question of ourselves: what are we hiding today? And will tomorrow's historians look back on our masks with the same mix of fascination, horror, and empathy? You've just witnessed one of the darkest punishments in history. But many more still lurk in the shadows. So if you dare, subscribe to Torture Vault, where every scream from the past still echoes.